welcome back to Drunk Comics.
I'm happy to be back and happy to be drinking.
Always happy to be drinking.
I'm currently winning a bet with my wife, who didn't think I would actually go on camera wearing the Grumpy Bear sleep suit she got me for Christmas a while back. But
You
it's
have to
cold
stand up.
and it's really warm. So what?
You have to stand up. You have to stand up so we get the full effect.
Yes, you have to get the full glory of the Grumpy Bear sleep suit. And Grumpy Bear is practically my Patronus, so it works even better that way.
I love it.
A little Grumpy Bear next to my desk and everything.
I love it so much.
It amuses my wife deeply, so there's also that. So
anyway. My favorite guest outfit. All right, so
if I can get Ruth and A, where it's a cosplay channel.
Exactly. All right, so what are you here to talk about today?
I am going to talk about, in as focused a manner as possible, the long tangled history in comics of the Vision and the Scarlet Witch, which, no joke, is the oldest ongoing storyline in all of comics, and I can make an argument is the oldest running storyline in all of ongoing fiction.
Please do.
Because there's a whole, okay. Just so everyone knows, I pitched this to Kelly earlier this week because I'm like, oh my God, there's so much crazy stuff about Vision and Wanda that we're leaning into in the Wandavision series. So maybe we really need to recap this, but maybe we do it right away. And she was very generous. You were very generous in putting up with Mike. Can we record right away? And I swore to her I'd keep it under 20 minutes. We'll see if I succeed. Because in the wild history of the Vision and the Scarlet Witch, there are so many rabbit holes you could run down. I could go into how Wanda was first Magneto's flunky, then she was Magneto's daughter, then she wasn't Magneto's daughter anymore. Now she might be Magneto's daughter again, but we're not going into that. I could also go into how she was born in the shadow of Wendigo Mountain, with her birth fueled by Marvel's version of Cthulhu. And her midwife was a highly advanced cow, but we're leaving that off to the side too. Oh yes. The story of Wendigo and Bova the advanced cow is its own thing. But I want to stay focused on our star-crossed lovers here, the Vision and the Scarlet Witch. As it was put in, Steve, back in the old days, Marvel had an introduction to every character on the top of the first page. The one in the Vision and Scarlet Witch series of the 80s read, here's a synthetic man, she's a mutant sorceress. Once they were outcast, but now they have each other and a love that can withstand every danger they face. They fight crime. All right, that last part I added on. It just sounds like a they fight crime setup.
I agree.
Wandavision, the Hill Street Blues remix. So, full disclosure, I have been a fan of Vision and Wanda for as long as I've been a fan of comics. I've been fascinated by their continuity for as long as I've known what continuity was. One of the very first comics I bought with my own money was Vision and the Scarlet Witch #1 in 1986, as opposed to reading, my cousin's comics, or just finding stuff at the library. And because there was an ad in other comics plugging it, talking about, I think their exact words were, this is a story that goes back to the very first Marvel comic and continues now. And I'm like, I need to hear about this. I need to learn about this. And that ad is on the list of visual aids I sent over to Kelly. So if nothing else, I hope you pop that one up because it's amazing. Because it sums up a lot of this history up until that point. Anyway, I've been a fan of this relationship forever. And there are a few things in comics that have been more completely screwed up and ruined than the Vision Wanda romance. And I'm in my third decade of waiting for someone to unscrew it, and no one has yet unscrewed it, except, once again, Kevin Feige and the Marvel movie people continue quantum leaping through various parts of Marvel Universe history, setting right what once went wrong. And Vision and Wanda's romance went really, really astonishingly wrong. And thus far, the movies are taking all the right steps to fix it, to the point that this is like healing old fandom trauma for me. I'm being sarcastic there. People, if anyone's taking me really seriously there, it's not. I'm not literally traumatized, but this is a mild.
I mean, this is why we drink.
It's a little bit of a gaping wound on Marvel history that might actually get fixed, in this do-over, this next chance to get it right. Okay. So, okay.
Deep breaths.
We're going to go all the way back to the year 1939, the timely age of comics. Batman is 3 months old. Superman is a year old. We're very early on in the superhero era.
Now I'm picturing Batman and Superman in diapers, which is basically what they're kind of like, if you think about it.
Into
You're thinking
this,
about it
into this comes Marvel Comics #1, sometimes referred to as Marvel Mystery Comics #1. I'm a little unclear on that, but Marvel Comics #1, the first comic in the eventually ongoing Marvel universe. And the lead story on that is the Human Torch. Now, the Human Torch of 1939 was not human. He was an android. He was an android created by a Dr. Phineas Thomas Horton, who became very important in the Marvel universe later on. But at this point, we aren't even into that. But he's an android created by Horton who can set himself on fire. Basically, Human Torch powers, except he's a robot. And he finds that he is not entirely welcome among men because people will try to use him for his abilities, or don't believe he's really human because he's an android. And the story, it's very fish out of water, very, how will one man survive as an outcast type stuff. But it was pretty popular. It went really well, in the 1940s. To give a sense of how far this goes back, this is 2 years prior to Stan Lee first writing a comic. One other thing I'm going to mention, by the way, a lot of the facts we're going to be going through here actually get retconned and changed later on. So I'm going to tell things a little bit in chronological order, but that doesn't mean it's the order in which they were told. Because, for instance, although this was not in the comics of the 1940s, the 60s revised it so that the Human Torch formed a team, a super team, with Captain America, Namor the Submariner, and some of their kid partners like Bucky and so forth, and it was called the Invaders. The Invaders didn't actually appear in the comic till 1969 or so, but in the Marvel continuity, they're all through the 1940s fighting Nazis and fighting crime. And little known fact, in the comics, in the mainstream Marvel universe, the Human Torch, Jim Hammond, is the one who killed Adolf Hitler in his bunker and personally blew up the bunker.
Good for him.
Comics.
Also, kids, punch Nazis whenever you get the chance.
Yes, punch Nazis. Be like the Human Torch. So, more and more stories go on. Sometime in the 1950s, the Human Torch has a battle where he is irradiated and he's irradiated and causes damage to people around him. He feels the only way to save the people around him is to shut himself down, so he's no longer a danger and a threat. So he shuts himself down, and he believed dead and buried. So the Human Torch is buried in the 1950s. Cut up to 1963. Now it's the Marvel Age of Comics. Stan Lee has been writing for 20 years. He's taking a bunch of new and old concepts and shoving them in every which way into the Marvel universe, into his new Marvel universe. Captain America comes back from the dead, rejoins the Avengers, or joins the Avengers rather. Namor the Submariner is the first of a Fantastic Four foe, and then becomes a member of the Avengers. And all sorts of fun chaos happens in those chaotic early Stan years. One person Stan did not bring back was the original Human Torch, primarily because he had created a new version of the Human Torch for the Fantastic Four, and he didn't want to overlap each other. Enter Roy Thomas. Roy Thomas is sort of Stan Lee's protege. He was the editor-in-chief of Marvel after Stan, and he loved crazy continuity stuff. Roy Thomas is also one of the most important of all Avengers writers because he's the guy that really defined the Avengers as we know them. Stan wrote the first few dozen issues, and they were pretty standard superheroics, but the exact nature of the banter and the team dynamic of Avengers really started under Roy Thomas. And one of their early major villains under Thomas was Ultron, who got a little short shrift in the movies, but is one of the Avengers' all-time biggest enemies in the comics. Ultron, in one of Roy Thomas's stories, steals the body of the Human Torch, of the original Human Torch, because I believe Roy had said something to Stan like, do you mind if I start strip mining the past even further? I'm not sure about that, so let me strike that. Anyway, Roy liked strip mining the past, that's for sure. That's why he created the Invaders. To tie Cap, the Human Torch, and Namor together in a team. The Ultron steals the original Human Torch and builds the Human Torch into a new body, namely that of the Vision, which is how we get cut back from 1939 all the way to here. The Ultron creates the Vision robot and takes the brain patterns of an Avengers ally called Wonder Man, who had died many issues earlier. His name was Simon Williams, who was an ionic being because ions do that kind of thing in comics. Simon Williams, was dead, and so his brain patterns were imprinted on the Vision in the Human Torch's body, and Ultron creates the Vision as we know him now. The Ultron version of the Vision is not very different, actually, from what we've seen in the movies. He's got the red skin, the green outfit. The look has stayed basically the same. His personality is the same, in that he's this weirdly distant robot, but he's not inhuman. He has a little trouble with emotions, but he knows what emotions are.
Right.
So he becomes very quickly on. He turns against Ultron and becomes a valued member of the Avengers, and has been one of the core members of the Avengers team ever since, basically. And like I said, one of the things I like about the MCU is that their Vision is dead on target. That's the way Viz acts. By the way, I love that everyone's calling him Viz in WandaVision, because Roy Thomas had everyone call him Viz, V-I-Z-H, and so it just sticks if you've been reading the comics way too long, like me, and you start calling characters by their first name, like Clark and Bruce. Okay, so another member of the Avengers at this time is Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. Super powerful, vaguely defined powers, because she just points to things and makes them happen. So her powers are basically whatever the writer at the moment actually needs it to be.
Yep.
And Wanda and the Vision slowly began a romance in the comics. Steve Englehart was the writer who was handling that, and Steve Englehart is another one of the most defining writers of the Avengers. Especially the Joss Whedon, the first movie in 2012, had a very Steve Englehart feel to it. Mm-hmm. Englehart starts romancing them together, and this goes on for some years under Englehart, and it's further in both of them. They're torn because he's not precisely a robot; he's a synthetic human, which important difference here. Which means he feels human, he acts human, he believes he should be able to love and marry like a human. Wanda's brother, Pietro Maximoff, loathes the Vision, partially because he's very protective of Wanda, but also because he thinks Wanda should not be, romancing what he considers to be a talking toaster. And he says this many times. And the reason we know it's a bad thing to call Vision a talking toaster is that Pietro's always saying it, and Pietro is a jerk ass.
Yeah.
If you want to tell your moral in a story, if you want to tell your moral in a Marvel comic, have Pietro say the opposite of the moral, and now you know what the moral is. In this case, it's bad to say Wanda and Vision can't be together just because she's a mutant and he's a synthetic human. 1974, 1975, Steve Englehart is going cosmic crazy with the comics. He worked with Jim Starlin on some of the early Thanos stories, and everyone involved wanted to make things bigger, better, crazier. So Englehart writes a cosmic saga in the Avengers in which Immortus, who was one of their old foes, and boy, we're going to get to him in a minute. Immortus is involved in trying to find what's called the Celestial Messiah. The Celestial Messiah will be this being who is going to bring peace to the universe, and it is very important that he be preserved. And it turns out that one of the Avengers' allies is the Celestial Madonna, destined to give birth to the Celestial Messiah, namely Mantis, who we may know from Guardians of the Galaxy, and only vaguely resembles the Mantis of the comics in that she has antennae and she's got psychic powers. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot similar. Anyway, okay, I'm getting to the part that makes even me bug out my eyes here. In the course of this great big cosmic saga is when Vision and Wanda decide we should get married. We should get married. We should make it, authentic. We should make it real, and maybe build a life together. In the same story, the Celestial Messiah, Mantis, is also I don't even know how to boil this one down. The father of the Celestial Messiah is going to be one of the Kotati, who are Kree. Kree aliens, but there's no other way to put it. They're broccoli people. The Kotati they look like psychic broccoli. Mm-hmm. Comics. Mm-hmm. Oh boy. Anyway, the father of the Celestial Messiah will be one of the leaders of the broccoli people, the Kotati, who possess the dead body of another old Avengers ally, the Swordsman. I promise all this ties up together in the end.
Oh,
Marvel left me a really good spot to end this up on, actually. Anyway, so the causality is possessing the body of the swordsman and old Avengers ally, who is also Hawkeye's trainer and former best friend. So, and Immortus performs a double marriage ceremony that day, where the Celestial Madonna marries the Broccoli Man and Wanda marries the Vision.
oh, okay.
And everyone looks to live happily ever after. Okay, now this is the part where one might normally say it gets complicated, but that's only because we're just getting the time travel here. This is one of those things that could branch off for another 25 minutes. So I'll just say Immortus is kind of an Avengers ally at this point, but not really, because he's one of those guys who always works on his own motives, and also he's Kang the Conqueror.
Oh shit!
He is the future version of Kang the Conqueror, the possibly greatest enemy the Avengers have ever faced. Except he's a older, more burned out Kang who just wants to create peace in time. He wants to become the master of time and make it peaceful. So Immortus is like a warrior turned librarian. So he and Kang are often fighting with each other because time travel. Immortus might also be Doctor Doom or related to Doctor Doom or Mr. Fantastic's father, possibly all of the above. Time travel.
Timey-wimey, wibbly wobbly.
This only becomes vague. That part is only vaguely relevant later on, but Immortus being Kang, I think, is important to bring up there. So, everyone seems to be living happily ever after. Right around this point,
spoiler alert, happily ever after.
No, it's never happily ever after. Right around this point, and I don't know if it's before or after, we get the first of an ongoing series of very bad plot lines for Wanda, in which some outside force takes advantage of her reality warping powers and turns her into a weapon, or makes her go insane and fight everybody and become a major threat. At my last count, this has happened at least 4 times in the Marvel Universe. There's probably a couple I'm missing. But in the very first one, she's possessed by the god Catan, who is Marvel's copyright-free version of Cthulhu, to take over the universe, etc. And she almost kills all the Avengers, and everything's fine in the end, but not for the last time. The Scarlet Witch has no agency in her own story and is a tool of the bad guy. So, now we're into the 1980s, and Steve Englehart is still writing most of the Avengers stuff. He writes two miniseries starring Vision and Wanda. The first is a miniseries that ends with Wanda finding out Magneto's her father, which is the first time that's been revealed. The second miniseries is a 12-parter, and that's the most relevant one here because it is what is driving WandaVision the most. It is shortly after Vision and Wanda's marriage. They have retired from the Avengers. They're trying to make a calm, peaceful life for themselves. So they get the idea to move into a small town, and try to live a peaceful, normal life there.
Sound familiar, people?
They're Avengers, so you can imagine just how well that goes. But more or less, they become a pretty well-respected members of the town. There are witches there, by the way. There's a whole Wanda and witches is a whole other thing. Wanda's mentor's name is Agatha Harkness, who's a witch who was burned at the stake 400 years earlier, but that doesn't really stop her from coming around doing her Obi-Wan Kenobi routine. I bring up Agatha because there's a pretty good chance Agnes in WandaVision is Agatha Harkness, but who knows at this point? Anyone could rip off their mask and be Mephisto, Agatha Harkness, Quicksilver, who knows? But Dottie and Agnes are 2 characters whose identity hasn't been discerned by the characters in WandaVision as of episode 4, so that makes me very suspicious.
That's interesting.
Okay. So Vision and Scarlet Witch comic, they're living on their own. They're married. Everyone's happy. After a great deal of battling evil villains, because Wonder Man, by the way, has come back to life earlier at this point. So Wonder Man is kind of like the Vision's brother. Almost forgot about that. His birth brother hates the Vision and Wonder Man, is trying to kill them both throughout this series. Ultron shows up. It's comics. It's nuts. But at the end of the series, Wanda becomes pregnant, or midway through the series, she becomes pregnant through a means of magic that is never really clearly explained because it doesn't have to be. She's a mutant. He's an artificial man. She warps reality. I can believe he can get her pregnant. That is the least difficult lift I've been asked to handle thus far. As
a mutant who can warp reality and sort of cyborg love each other enough.
At the end of that miniseries, Wanda and Vision have their babies, and everything goes great. Billy and Tommy, Tommy and Billy. The oldest one's Tommy, which I appreciate that they're doing that in WandaVision too. Tommy is named after Phineas Thomas Horton, the Vision's father as the Human Torch, and Billy is named after Simon Williams, Wonder Man, who is the Vision's brother. So
I literally squealed when their names were
oh, I know, right? Tommy and Billy in comics are the only thing that give me hope that all this will ever sort itself out. Because boy, you want to talk about characters I never thought we'd see again.
I love those characters.
So,
anyways, go on.
I'm at my midway point here. I don't know how long I've been going on. So,
you're good.
Then is where things start to fall apart. Because you get a series of Marvel writers who seem to have missed the memo that the Vision is a human being. In particular, a guy named John Byrne, who is a fabulous writer and artist. He was an artist on the X-Men and on its most legendary run. Did Fantastic Four and other things. He's kind of, he's not as good as he used to be, let's put it that way. However, in the 80s, John Byrne was still at the peak of his form and probably one of the most popular pencilers before the superstar era of Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane came along. John Byrne, for whatever reason, thinks like Quicksilver. He would give interviews to Fan Press where he said, I don't buy this. I cannot believe Wanda could or should be married to a toaster and have kids with him. As the head writer of Avengers West Coast at the time, which gave him control over that franchise, one of the first things he does is has Vision disassembled by the world government over a thing, one of those other rabbit holes where Vision had accidentally taken control of the world to try to end crime. But Vision is disassembled by the world government and reassembled as an emotionless version of himself that has the memories of his old self, but he's not Vision anymore. He is he's a walking calculator, that looks and sounds like the Vision, but isn't the Vision.
No way that could possibly be a bad thing.
Nope.
Story-wise or like ramifications-wise. Come on now.
Especially when the writer feels like he's doing it as a matter of moral certainty to show that it's wrong to. I don't know. The internet's so weird. This might get back to John Byrne someday, but tell me I'm lying, John. Tell me I'm lying. I read the interviews at the time.
I love your work on Superman, but no, that's terrible. Anyways, go on.
So when I read these stories at the time, I thought they were a lot better than they were because I didn't realize how badly they were going to end. But I was a big fan of Byrne at the time, and I was a big fan of Vision and Wanda, and I assumed this was going to be an obstacle they were facing that they would have to overcome together.
Right.
It's one of those. There will be an ending thing because people eventually come back together. Nope. Byrne wanted Vision to stay emotionless and pale and colorless.
Why?
And yeah.
Also, characters like that aren't fun to write. So
I know. Yeah. Vision is for years he talks about emotion. He makes Data in season 1 of The Next Generation seem outspoken. And that is when John Byrne decides to put WandaVision and the Avengers through the ringer. Because for reasons I can't remember, they dig up the body of the original Human Torch. For some reason, someone had informed them they needed to do this. I forget the exact details, but yes, they dig up the body of the original Human Torch. And the most important thing to discover is that there is a body of the original Human Torch, which shouldn't make sense because the Vision's body is the original Human Torch. Oh yeah, I remember I think they were searching for clues to be able to fix the Vision's body at the time because he'd been disassembled. Anyway, the Human Torch comes back to life, having been, shed of all the radiation, and he eventually joins the Avengers, becomes friends with Cap again, and so forth. And he goes off and lives his life. But massive mystery here because what's Vision's supposed to be built in the Human Torch? For whatever reason, John Byrne did not like that, so he retroactively changes it so that the Vision was always built by Ultron from spare parts, using the Human Torch as a bit of a template, but that he had never actually dug up the body of the original Human Torch, which was a big, weird retcon that mostly flew by us because the very next issue is when Wanda and Vision's children are revealed to be figments of Wanda's imagination. That could never have happened because, once again, a mutant sorceress and a synthetic man can't have a kid together in this version of writing. And so her children are revealed to be figments of her imagination. And boy, this is where you're going to want to show one of the pictures I got there, because no one will believe me if they can't see this. They are revealed to be figments of her imagination that have been drawn from hell itself. And one of the last times we see Tommy and Billy, they are screaming souls fused to a devil's hands as he is on his way to hell. That is on the cover of the issue.
Why would you?
It's just
Do you like pain?
It was very Hellraiser-ish.
Your characters and your readers, why?
Wanda. And Wanda goes completely catatonic after all this. Just so much stress, she literally no longer recognizes anything. And everyone's mad at Vision because Vision has just seen his kids disappear and he has no emotional reaction to it because he's basically Siri at this point.
Or a Doctor Who reference, he was literally turned into a Cyberman.
Yeah. And once again, I think, okay, there will be a big rescue finish here. No. The whole point here was to get Vision and Wanda apart, write the kids out of the stories forever, and poof, never seen again. And then
drive Wanda crazy.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, and
I know where this is going.
The next Wanda Goes Crazy story happens there, where Magneto picks her back up, and she is Brotherhood of Evil mutinying for a while, and then Immortus gets involved, and Immortus reveals all along he's been nice to Vision and Wanda, and even officiated their marriage because he wants to steal Wanda's power to become the master of all time. So, blah blah blah. Wanda used as a weapon. Blah blah blah. Moving on. Immortus gets defeated. And once again, she's not really a factor in her own story.
Screw that noise.
Say what?
I said, screw that noise.
And so here I am as an avid reader of the Avengers all through the 90s, which is a crazy time, let me tell you. And it never fixes. Vision continues to be emotionless. Wanda continues to, oh, by the way, Agatha Harkness erases Wanda's memory of the children, so as not to further traumatize her, which not maybe the best idea.
No. And
so for the full 1990s, anytime Vision and Wanda are in a panel together, it is at the very least extremely awkward and at most possibly extremely traumatizing, because Wanda every so often tries to get through to him. There's in one panel of the original Infinity Gauntlet miniseries that inspired the last couple of Avengers movies, we see Wanda and Vision joining the team. It has its own version of the portal scene. They're coming through the portals, and you see them holding hands for one panel in a way that also says there's nothing there. It's really good visual storytelling by George Perez that is in the visual aids I sent along. So
I love him.
But that's like the only time in years their marriage had even been referenced.
Oh, that's so
we're 10 years now since Wanda's kids have turned out to be figments of her imagination. Heroes Reborn happens, all the Avengers are killed and come back on another universe that turns out to be inside a big basketball Franklin Richards is carrying around under his arm. Comics. Hey kids. Pow, zap. And then all the Avengers come back, recreated by Franklin after having been apparently killed by a sort of merged Juggernaut Professor X Magneto called Onslaught, which is another of those sentences that only really works in the 1990s. Oh. So Wanda and Vision come back and the Avengers are reformed, and we get for the next 5 years, in my opinion, the best of all Avengers runs. Kurt Busiek starts writing Avengers. He's a fabulous writer. Wrote JLA Avengers, he wrote Marvels, he writes Astro City. He's fabulous. And he does those 5 years are basically the best Avengers run of all time in my book. And a good chunk of it is drawn by George Perez, who is definitely the world's greatest Avengers writer. And in the course of things, Wanda and Vision are reverting more to their old selves. Wanda is interested in being back with Vision again. Vision, when he comes back from the Heroes Reborn universe, the writers at that time took a chance to undo a lot of other flaws. And so Vision gets his emotions back. He's no longer pale and white. He's, green, red, and yellow like the Vision we now know and love, who confesses to Wanda that he's being cold to her because he doesn't want to hurt her anymore because he thinks marrying her was a mistake, that only caused her pain. So Wanda ends up dating Simon Williams for a while, Wonder Man, i.e. the Vision's mental twin brother.
That's a little weird. but
the whole at the same time, Vision is hitting on Captain Marvel, so or Carol Danvers, who would eventually become Captain Marvel. She's Warbird at the time, so it's a whole Fleetwood Mac situation for everyone involved.
yeah, makes sense. I mean, that's comics for you. Like everyone kind of gets with everyone.
Yep.
Almost incestuous with the comics with the superhero team. Sometimes actually incestuous.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
So
my
into all this, we have Kurt Busiek. Kurt will hardly argue against the idea that he's a guy who just does continuity fixes, and that's true. He tells a good story, and he sometimes uses it to make some continuity fixes, but he doesn't just do it for its own sake. So I'll say that up front, and I'll also say he still does a lot of continuity fixes. There's a story called Avengers Forever, which was a really great Kang and Mortis story where Kang and Mortis are battling through time and dragging different Avengers from different time periods into it. And that's where we learn a phrase that I would use in Avengers fandom forever. I still made today. Space Phantoms did it. Because Immortus is revealed to have, a thing called, I think, the Destiny Stone. That's kind of like lets him warp reality and change things. And he has a small army of Space Phantoms from Limbo, not Limbo, but comics Limbo, who are these shape-changing weird aliens who can take anyone's shape. And we find out that at numerous times in the past, when there was a particularly stupid storyline that can't be explained by any rational fact, it was just Immortus using Space Phantoms in disguise to mess with everybody. That was so freaking audacious. I could do nothing but salute in awe.
That is so
Space Phantoms. And it turns out Space Phantoms are involved, bringing us back to the actual point. They're involved in the Vision and the Human Torch and Wonder Man and the whole Ultron business. And it is implied that they were involved in messing with Wanda's kids as well. It's hard to say because every so often another time traveling bad guy would show up and claim he knew something about what happened to Wanda's kids that no one else knew. At this point, though, we're 10 years out from that point. But it's revealed that Immortus went back in time and split the Human Torch's body in two. Literally in two doppelganger sides, one of which became the Vision's body, and the other of which stayed in the grave, eventually came back as a Human Torch. So the Vision is the Human Torch, and he's not the Human Torch. Space Phantoms.
Schrodinger's Vision.
I look at my notes here. I want to see what I'm missing. Very important thing here. Somewhere around this point, this is not revealed for another 15 years in the comics, but somewhere around this point, Wanda feels really bad about the fact that she's with Wonder Man and being happy, and that Vision is alone and not doing so well. And perhaps a foolhardy move, she asked Hank Pym, who is the AI expert of the team, who is involved in Vision's repairs and so forth, to create a mental engram of her own brain patterns in much the same way Simon Williams' brain patterns were implanted in the Vision. She wanted to make a copy of her brain that could be implanted in a robot body in and of itself.
Oh no.
She was the reason she gave was, I know we can't ever be together, but you deserve love, and this might be the most effective way to make a wife for you. Now, someone who's been dealing with Ultron this many decades, you would think would know better than that. But according to the comics, she didn't.
Well, comics would not be interesting if the heroes knew better.
That's true. That is very true. After that, this happens in 1998 or so, but isn't actually revealed until about 2016. After that, we get a few more years of storytelling, and what bugged me, I don't know if Kurt Busiek thinks it's great to have the Vision and Scarlet Witch together or he doesn't. My thought was, if any writer was ever going to unscrew this, it's going to be Busiek. He didn't unscrew it. I don't know if he didn't want to or if he couldn't or what, but the point is it wasn't unscrewed by the end. It was referred to a couple times in JLA Avengers, which was nice. In that there's a bit right at the end. Have you read it, the whole thing? JLA Avengers?
No.
There's a bit at the end where the characters are all coming from a universe where they're happy, but it's a pocket universe they've been put into to make them distracted. And the games master who's doing this universe battling challenge is telling them, you need to fix the universe and put it right on its axis. And Captain America says, we're not going to do this until you show us what you're talking about. Show us the world you want us to make real. And so he shows them both the real worlds, as both of them know them. This is Superman sees himself dying by doomsday, and Vision and Wanda see themselves going through all that hell. Like we can't do this. But one of the things that makes the ending of JLA Avengers great is that every hero chooses to restore that reality anyway, knowing what's going to happen. And I feel like that gives a smidgen of agency back to Vision and Wanda. That's a smidge. Yeah. Right around this time, we have the third, maybe fourth time that Wanda goes crazy in the comics, and it is the most infamous. This is Avengers Disassembled, in which she basically destroys the Avengers. She blows up Avengers Mansion. She goes completely insane because she's been reminded that her kids actually existed, and it traumatizes her and breaks her. And she goes on a killing spree, kills several Avengers, kills the Vision. She mind controls She-Hulk into ripping the Vision in half in a way even he can't come back from. And then is defeated by Doctor Strange and Agatha Harkness, kind of, because I think Agatha's dead at this point again, and is taken away by Magneto. Whereupon the House of M storyline happens about a year later, where Wanda, having gone insane, makes the entire world into a Magneto-run paradise. And further at the end, because she hates her brother and she hates her father and she hates being a mutant, she erases the entire concept of mutants from the multiverse, except for a handful of the X-Men.
No more mutants.
No more mutants. And that sticks for a surprisingly long time. And then Wanda vanishes, after House of M, completely off the radar, and is not seen for several years. Vision spends the rest of the 2010s in repair. And Wanda, poof, vanishes. No one knows where she is. No one's even sure she's alive, because after No More Mutants, she just stopped being there.
Interesting.
And now we get to the part where things get a little bit hopeful again. I hope am I doing okay? Am we on?
Yeah.
Because that's where Young Avengers kicks in. Shortly after the Avengers have broken up, Iron Lad, the leader of the Young Avengers, comes back from the future with a plan to bring together potential Avengers of the next generation to fix up the fact that everything is screwed up. And also the fact that Iron Lad himself is young Kang the Conqueror, and he does not want to become Kang the Conqueror, so he's forming his own Avengers team to stop young Kang from becoming old Kang, and this is why time travel gives everyone a headache. But he brings together numerous Young Avengers over the course of the first two miniseries, two of whom are I believe is Billy Kaplan, who takes on the superhero named Wiccan, which terrible name, especially since Billy is canonically Jewish and he's not really Wiccan in any way, but he's a magic user, etc. And his brother is Tommy. I forget Tommy's last name, but Billy and Tommy are Wiccan and Speed, and Tommy's power is super speed. And almost immediately, people who know better start saying, not only do you look like Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, you have their powers, and Wanda and Pietro's children disappeared into a dark pit of hell fused to Master Pandemonium's hands.
Not Wanda and Pietro's.
Say what?
Not Wanda and Pietro's. Freudian slip.
Oh, what I say? Oh, yeah.
Wanda and
I'm not even that drunk. Yeah, I said 20 minutes.
Like Wanda and Pietro, but yeah, no, I get it.
Wanda and Vision's kids, have been missing all this time. Is it possible you're them? And this goes on for some time over the course of the comics, actually, while they're trying to figure out what the hell to do. And it is after the Civil Wars end, after World War Hulk and some other crazy plot lines go down, it is Tommy and Billy who eventually find the Scarlet Witch in Latveria for other weird reasons, who has been, surprise, surprise, brainwashed and is about to be used as a tool of superpower by Dr. Doom. Eventually, the story makes it clear that they are indeed Wanda and Viz's children. who have been somehow reborn magically because they have their own parents and their own families and their own lives and their own beliefs, but they're the souls of those kids, whatever that means, reborn. And there's quite frankly a kind of a heartwarming reunion between Wanda and them at the end of the story. And from there, well, we'll get to Wanda in a second. I need to bring up one other small thing about the Young Avengers. Because after the first storyline, Iron Lad, the young Kang the Conqueror from the future, let's just say the consciousness of his future armor animates the body of the Vision. And so he takes the Vision's body. And it's the engrams of Kang the Conqueror in the body of the Vision. And Kang the Conqueror will one day become Immortus, okay, who officiated the wedding of Vision and Wanda, who also then have two kids who are teammates brought together by Iron Lad, who is Kang, who is Immortus, who is Vision. I swear I need... This is one of those Pepe Silva chart moments, you just need a bunch of strings on and thumbtacks on a wall. But so for me, that was the beginning of breathing a little bit easier on this, because once a gaping wound just taken off of fandom. The Scarlet Vision and Wanda's kids are actually going to be okay. Now, one of the weird things that has happened, Vision has almost never acknowledged his kids on panel. The only time they've even shared a panel is there's one story where he's convinced to at least finally go visit, Billy and meet him. And the last panel is him saying hello to Billy on his doorstep. And we never see what actually happens between them.
Yeah. And
I swear that's the only time we've ever heard Vision even acknowledge they're his kids in any way, shape, or form. Every other time it gets brought up, he's like, that's the figments of Wanda's imagination that somehow came back to life. Not my thing, not my problem. Oh yeah, I should bring up Vision is back, because I told you before Vision's body was animated by young Kang. It's not anymore, and he's back to life, having rebuilt himself after that. Many years later, after Wanda had killed everyone, tried to kill everyone, and so just to put a final pin on their relationship, I think when Avengers versus X-Men started in 2012, we see a scene of Wanda trying to come back to Avengers Mansion just to see her old friends and family, because she's been away way too long and has still been kind of isolating herself. And Vision shows up at the front and basically slams the door in her face. Tells her, I never want to see you again. There will be no forgiveness between us. I understand you were troubled, but you hated me so much. You used me as a weapon to attack our friends, and then you killed me. Which is fair enough, but once again, I still think space fandoms were involved there too, to be perfectly honest. Anyway, point being, he basically throws Wanda out, breaking her heart and the audience's heart too.
Yeah.
Several more years pass, and once again, in the last couple of years, things have warmed up very slightly between Wanda and Vision. We've seen them a couple times, where they're even friendly together. There was a story 2 years ago called No Road Home, in which Wanda, at this point, she is dating Dr. Voodoo, who is the former Sorcerer Supreme, who's also heading up Strange Academy, which is a Dr. Strange's academy to teach young sorcerers, where Wanda also teaches. Eventually, they brought back all the mutants, by the way, but the X-Men still kind of hate Wanda and every so often try to kill her. But Wanda becomes a member of the Avengers again, and we see her making peace with Vision. We never really see it happen, but like I said, once Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany showed that the chemistry was there on the movie screen, I think it was pretty clear to everyone that we needed to make them not feuding anymore. So we've even seen them speaking civilly to each other, hugging, holding hands in a friendly kind of way. It's kind of nice. And I'm hoping that this all means that we will see this relationship. Obviously, it's going to run through hell in Wandavision, possibly literally. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to end where Vision is, a Commodore 64 and the kids are in hell. I just don't think that's where we're going. At least not to end the story. Might happen along the way, but I'm hoping we'll give them the happy ending that Wanda and Vision have been denied since 89, which is 32 years, which means I've spent the majority of my existence on this world giving more of a shit about these two than almost any human being should. Nerdery.
Fingers crossed.
Now,
Don't book it up, MCU.
I am so glad that Marvel gave me a gift this summer, which is a perfect note to end on. Because there was a big crossover this summer called Empire, which is Kree-Skrull War stuff. And it's mostly about how the Celestial Messiah from way back in 1975, son of Mantis and the Broccoli Man, married with Wandavision. The Celestial Messiah comes back and tries to conquer the universe with his army of broccoli people powers. I say broccoli people. I think they're more like tree people. They're kind of like Groot with more leaves. There are different variations of the Katati, and some of them actually look like broccoli. Broccoli wearing robes. God, I wish I'd given you a photo of them because they're pretty weird. So the Celestial Messiah is a broccoli person trying to conquer the universe. And in the end, the universe is saved by Hulkling, who Teddy Kaplan, who is a member of the Young Avengers, who is, at the end of the story, married to his longtime boyfriend, Wiccan. And the last time I've seen Vision, the Scarlet Witch, on a panel together in comics was at that wedding in a big crowd scene where they're up in one teeny little corner. I've given you both the crowd scene and the zoom in if you want it. Maybe I'll just post some of these pictures in the chat. We see them talking civilly at their son's wedding, and I swear that's the closest I've seen Vision to either of his kids, both of his kids actually, in 11 years. So I'm holding out some hope that maybe all this gets better. Oh, remember I talked about not going off track? You know, I didn't even talk about the time the Vision actually used those mental engrams Wanda gave him to make a family. And then the Wanda type Vision robot then goes insane and starts killing people because apparently you just can't do a story involving Wanda's brain without making her psycho. And then I believe she erases herself from Vision's memory entirely. It's a little foggy. It's been a couple of years. I should have gone and reviewed it, but that was a side note where Vision married Wanda as a robot and it ended really badly.
Yeah, of course it did.
So I'll be very surprised if within 12 months we don't see the Vision and the Scarlet Witch back together in the comics. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. I think that's where it's going. I think WandaVision will end with them together. I'm hoping for something resembling a happy ending out of this mess.
Well, thank you.
Oh boy, I have enjoyed this greatly. This is like my little love note to everyone out there whose friends are getting really smug and telling you people you should have read the comics, you know, and not to understand what WandaVision is. I'm the Cliff Notes for you. I promise you've got all the high points.
Anyone who says you should have read the comics is like, do you not realize that there's decades of comics to read? Don't be like that. Don't be a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Like, yes, okay, I'm gonna say this. The comics are awesome. And yes, you should read the comics, but also I acknowledge that it's a little intimidating. So this show is hopefully gonna make it less intimidating. And like you said,
I hope it gives you a little bit of the same love for this crazy continuity that I did, because that's what I love about Marvel. You know, there is no frustration in my voice whatsoever when I use the word Celestial Messiah of the broccoli people. This is why comics were made. This is why Groot and Rocket Raccoon stuck the landing so hard in Guardians of the Galaxy, because, you know, the old Tales to Astonish days, Groot, the monster from Planet X, was a kind of thing Stan and Jack came up with on their lunch break.
Possibly there were substances imbibed on their lunch break that are not legal.
Possibly, although I gotta say, I think Stan just got high off of his own supply, so to speak. I could be wrong. There's much we'll never understand about Stan.
But he gave us very much.
So yes, 82 years of history distilled down to however freaking many minutes I took for this.
I'll let you know once I edit it. Thank you for coming back.
I had a delightful time. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the next time we find some reason to talk to each other.
Oh, I'm sure we will find a reason. Cheers.
Cheers.
Uh-oh. You got it.